You need a home. My daughter needs someone to call mom, the lonely billionaire said to the shivering black maid sitting on the frozen bench. Amara Johnson sat hunched beneath the flickering shelter light at the corner of 7th Avenue, her body trembling in waves she could no longer control. Fever heat burned behind her eyes, clashing cruelly with the cold gnawing at her bones. Her gray work uniform showed beneath a thin, threadbare coat, her hands bare, swollen, red, were shoved deep into her sleeves. A few hours earlier, she hadn't been here. She had been on her knees scrubbing a marble floor in a brownstone that smelled of bleach and old money, her head spinning, sweat soaking her collar despite the cold. She had told him she was sick. She had whispered it at first, then said it louder when her knees buckled. I have a fever. Sir, I just need a short break. Dieston, her employer hadn't looked up from his phone. You people always have excuses. Now, she kept working. Each movement sent a pulse of pain through her skull. When she slowed, he noticed. When she asked if she could finish the remaining rooms in the morning, he laughed. You'll finish tonight, or you won't be paid. I go. By the time she wiped the last counter, her vision blurred. She reached for the envelope with her wages. He snatched it back. I'm docking you for poor performance. 2. She begged then, quietly at first. Then with tears she hated herself for. She explained about the fever, the missed bus, the snow. He called her lazy, ungrateful, said she should be thankful to have work at all. When she didn't move fast enough to leave, he grabbed the nearest object, a glass paperweight, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall inches from her head. Get out, he shouted. Don't ever come back. Actions early. She stumbled into the night with nothing but the clothes she wore and a bag so light it might as well have been empty. The door slammed. The lock turned. Now, hours later, Amara coughed sharply, the sound tearing at her chest. She pressed her lips together, willing herself not to cry. She had learned long ago that tears didn't soften people. They only confirmed what they already believed. The wind swept down the avenue, scattering snow across her lap. She looked up once more, searching for headlights, for anything. Nothing answered. Then tires crunching on ice. A black SUV eased down the block, its headlights carving tunnels through the snowfall. It slowed, stopped. In the back seat, a little girl pressed her mittened hands to the window, breath fogging the glass. Her brown eyes were wide, thoughtful, too old for her small face. Daddy, she whispered. She looks cold, like Mama did, when I dream about her. Elliot Graves felt his chest tighten. For 2 years, he had driven these streets wrapped in silence. A man known everywhere and understood nowhere. He never stopped for strangers. He did now. He stepped out of the car, the cold biting instantly through his coat. From the back seat, he retrieved a navy cashmere scarf, soft, worn, still faintly scented with lavender. He crossed the street and gently draped it around the woman's shoulders. At least keep warm, he said quietly. Amara flinched, then looked up. Startled, snow clung to her lashes. Her voice came out thin. I'm fine. Just waiting for the next bus. There isn't one, Elliot replied. Not tonight. Well, I'll manage. Have applies to plies. A violent cough bent her forward, and then she noticed the child in the back seat, watching her with open, earnest concern. That decided it. Let me give you a ride, Elliot said. You can't sit out here all night. Mark, she hesitated, habit, pride, fear all tangling together, but finally nodded. Just to the main station. Tuition. The warmth inside the SUV stung her frozen skin. Chloe smiled shyly. Hi. BK. Hi, Amara answered, managing a small smile of her own. For a moment, only the wipers spoke. Then Chloe reached forward, offering a pink hair tie from her wrist. You can fix my ponytail. It's messy. Tech. Amara chuckled softly and gathered the child's curls with careful hands. Chloe didn't pull away. Elliot watched in the mirror, his throat tightening. His daughter hadn't let anyone touch her hair since her mother died. I was going to drop you at a hotel, he said slowly. But you said you don't have a home. Easy. Amara stiffened. He chose his next words carefully. You need a home. And my daughter, she needs someone to call mom. Where consistent tension, undo. The silence that followed was thick, fragile. Amara searched his face for mockery, for pity, for anything false. There was only tired honesty. Before she could answer, Chloe leaned forward, clutching her teddy bear. Please stay, she whispered. Just for my bedtime story. And snow pressed against the windows. Amara pulled the scarf closer, feeling its warmth sink into her shoulders. Okay, she murmured. Just for tonight. Aye. The house was tall and modern. All glass and stone. Beautiful. Empty. Inside, there were no photos. No scattered toys. No signs of laughter. Only quiet and space. This place feels too quiet, Amara said softly. It has been, Elliot replied, since she passed. A possum. Away. Chloe tugged Amara's hand. I'll show you my room. Amara followed. Heart heavy. Steps light. She read the story of the snow fox, brushed Chloe's hair, felt the child relax against her. When Chloe fell asleep, Amara sat still for a moment, fingers resting gently on the blanket. She had been humiliated, cast out, left in the cold. And yet, here unexpectedly warmth had found her, not as rescue, not as charity, but as the quiet beginning of something she didn't yet dare to name. If this story touched you, leave a like and tell us where you're watching from. Maybe someone nearby is watching with you right now. The guest room was tucked away at the end of the second-floor hallway, quiet and small, warmed by a gentle hum from the electric fireplace near the window. A thick quilt had been laid neatly across the bed. An old armchair sat beside a modest nightstand. On it, a steaming mug of cocoa waited. Real cocoa, rich, dark, and fragrant. Next to it lay a folded note in crisp handwriting. Thank you for staying. Even for just tonight. Amara stood at the doorway for a long moment, the heat from the room brushing against her cold skin. The fever still simmered in the back of her head. Dull, but persistent. Her throat was raw, and her muscles ached from overuse and cold. But something deeper stirred inside her. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Seen. She sat down slowly in the armchair, pulling the quilt across her lap. Her hands, still aching, cradled the mug. The cocoa warmed her from the inside out, melting something frozen beneath the surface. The fire flickered gently. She glanced around. The room was modest. Yes, but nothing about it felt temporary. No harsh fluorescence. No bleach-stained floors. No clipped voices demanding more work for less pay. Here, there was softness, and a kind of silence that didn't hurt. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting her guard drop. Just for tonight, somewhere down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Perhaps Chloe, perhaps Elliot checking on his daughter. It was the kind of sound that didn't set off alarms. It was just a house breathing. In the early morning hours, Amara woke to the faint smell of coffee. She stretched cautiously, muscles stiff from the cold she'd endured the day before. Her fever had lessened. Or perhaps it was just that she wasn't shivering anymore. The scarf Elliot had given her was still wrapped around her shoulders, its softness a reminder that not every moment in her life had to be survived. Downstairs, she found the kitchen already lit by soft golden under-cabinet lights. The countertops were clean, everything in place, pristine, organized. There was no clutter, no spills, no noise. It felt like a model home more than a place people lived in. Elliot stood by the stove, pouring water into a kettle. He wore a gray sweater over a white shirt, sleeves rolled up to the elbows. The man didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a father trying not to fall apart. He turned as she stepped in. Morning. Regnos. Good morning, she replied, her voice husky. I hope the room was okay. 18. It was. She searched for the right word. Kind. 80, he smiled faintly. That's good to hear. Away. Chloe came bounding into the kitchen, her feet clad in fuzzy socks shaped like bears. She carried a drawing in one hand, and her hair was sticking out in 5 directions. Amara instinctively reached for the hairbrush on the counter. Mind if I help with this situation? Chloe grinned. Please. Daddy's ponytails are lopsided. Oh, Elliot raised an eyebrow. They have character. It is very lugs. Amara chuckled softly, gently brushing Chloe's curls and tying them back with the same pink scrunchie from the night before. The girl leaned into her touch without hesitation. Elliot noticed. Again, I was going to offer you a ride to the train station, he said carefully. But, if you're between places, there's room here. The guest room can be yours for a while. It's quiet. And Chloe clearly likes having you around. 82,000. Amara paused, hands still in Chloe's hair. Are you offering me a job? He hesitated. Not exactly. Not yet. Just space. And maybe a bit of structure. Chloe hasn't laughed like this in months. Become stilled. She straightened, her back stiffening. I'm not looking for pity. It's not pity, he said, meeting her eyes. It's presence. And I think we both could use more of that. Ardid. Amara looked at Chloe, who was now placing her drawing on the fridge, 3 stick figures holding hands, snow falling around them. I don't do this halfway, Amara said finally. If I stay, I'm present. I care. I'm comin' today. Elliot nodded. That's all I ask. It's Seema. Later that morning, Amara made scrambled eggs the way her grandmother had taught her slow, with butter and a dash of milk. Chloe sat at the counter, swinging her legs and humming softly, still wearing her bare socks. She asked questions between bites. Where did you grow up? Georgia, Amara said. Small town. Lots of pecan trees. Ugh, did you have a dog? I had a goldfish named Captain Bubbles. Chloe giggled, milk nearly spilling from her mouth. Elliot sat at the table, quietly sipping his coffee, watching them. After breakfast, Amara insisted on cleaning up, her body moving slower than usual but more purposeful. Her fever was a dull throb now. Manageable. Being useful helped. It gave her a rhythm. When she wiped down the table, she noticed a small antique clock sitting on the bookshelf, its face cracked, its ticking soft and irregular. A little broken, she said aloud, mostly to herself. Elliot looked up. It was my wife's. It's been that way since the accident. Amara hesitated, then nodded. Still beautiful. He didn't answer, but she saw something shift in his eyes. Later that afternoon, Amara took Chloe outside to catch snowflakes on their gloves. The girl twirled in the driveway, arms outstretched, laughter rising into the cold sky. For a moment, it felt like joy was not just possible but already here. That night, after Chloe was tucked in and the house had settled into quiet, Elliot stopped at the doorway of the guest room. Amara looked up from the book in her lap. I wanted to say thank you, he said. For what? For being kind to her. For making this house feel less hollow. She closed the book gently. She's a special kid. Tals. She didn't let anyone touch her hair for almost 2 years. Amara blinked, surprised. I think she sees something in you, he said. Or maybe just remembers something she's been missing. End quote. Amara looked at the fire, then back at him. I'm not trying to replace anyone. Ignata grasped. I know, he said. That's not what this is. He turned to go, but paused. Good night. Amara. Well, Tupper. Good night. Elliot. Duex. As the fire flickered behind her, she realized she wasn't cold anymore. Not just from the cocoa, not from the quilt, but from something gentler, something like the first flame in a long winter. By the 3rd morning, Amara's body had begun to settle. The fever had mostly gone, leaving a shadow of fatigue that clung to her shoulders like a shawl. But the cold ache had been replaced with something warmer, a rhythm, a familiarity she hadn't expected to grow so quickly. She rose before sunrise, quietly moving through the house in socked feet. In the kitchen, she brewed coffee in silence, her fingers moving instinctively grind. Pour. Stir. A few minutes later, she laid out 2 mugs on the counter. One was hers. The other she placed beside a napkin, folded neatly. On the napkin, she wrote in cursive, soft and small, "Good luck today," or at least fewer meetings. "Oh," the coffee maker hissed. She smiled to herself. There was something soothing in doing small things for someone who didn't ask but still noticed. By the time Elliot stepped into the kitchen, his tie half-tied, he paused mid-step. "You're up early," he said. "Old habits," she replied, sliding the second mug toward him. "Thought you might need this." He glanced at the folded note, reading it quickly before folding it again and tucking it into his jacket pocket without a word. "Thank you." Body 1. Chloe came bounding down the stairs moments later, still in pajamas, one slipper missing. Her hair was already half undone. A small curl stuck to her forehead. "Someone needs a quick ponytail," Amara said, crouching with the brush in hand. Chloe grinned and knelt, bouncing on her toes. "Can I have 2 braids today?" "Of course." "We creasing," Elliot watched, quietly sipping his coffee, as Amara worked through Chloe's hair with ease, humming a soft gospel tune under her breath. By the time Chloe was dressed, fed, and ready for school, Elliot checked his watch. "I can drop her off this morning." "I knowed. I'll walk her out," Amara offered, grabbing Chloe's red coat from the rack. Chloe wrapped her arms around Amara's waist before skipping toward the car. Elliot hesitated before unlocking the door. "She's been lighter lately," he said. Amara nodded. "Children know when the air in a house changes." Men. He met her eyes. "So do adults." "Eza." With that, he opened the car door, helped Chloe in, and drove off. The house fell quiet again. Amara returned inside, took the last sip of her coffee, and looked out the tall kitchen windows. Snow had started again, gentle flakes drifting across the gray sky, like tiny messages from somewhere softer than this world. She found herself walking the halls, taking slow steps past rooms she hadn't entered. The place was beautiful, but there was something missing, a heartbeat, a softness. No photos, no music, no clutter. The home of a man still frozen in grief. She passed a closed door and paused. Her hand hovered, then fell away. "Not mine to open," she reminded herself. Instead, she spent the next hour cleaning the guest bathroom and folding the fresh laundry that the housekeeper had left in a basket. She didn't have to. Elliot hadn't asked, but it felt right, like a small exchange for the warmth she'd been given. Later that day, she walked down the street to the corner bodega. The snow had slowed. She picked up a few things: her own toothpaste, a new brush for Chloe with pink bristles, and some lemons for tea. As she counted change at the register, the old man behind the counter gave her a curious glance. "You the new help up at the Graves place?" he asked. Amara froze. She looked up. "I'm just staying for a bit." "Oh, eh." He nodded slowly. "That little girl's been through a lot. Sweet kid. We have to do that, Amara offered a soft smile and took her bag. As she walked back, wind tugging gently at her coat, she thought about the way people reduced others to roles. Help. Guest. Nanny. No one ever asked what someone was before the storm hit. That night, Elliot came home later than usual. Chloe was already in her pajamas, sitting on the couch beside Amara with a book on her lap. Amara looked up when he entered. "Long day?" she asked. "The kind that never ends," he replied, hanging his coat on the rack. Chloe perked up. "Daddy, look what we made." She held up a plate slightly burnt cookies, some shaped like stars, others like lopsided hearts. Powdered sugar dusted the coffee table, the floor, and a bit of Amara's sleeve. Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Baking? Therapy," Amara said with a tired grin. She picked the music. 80 seconds, Motown. "We walked to." Chloe nodded proudly. "We danced." "Too." Elliot chuckled softly, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. "I haven't heard that kind of joy in this house in a long time." Was noted. He sat on the edge of the couch, picking up one of the cookies. "Star or heart?" Heart, Chloe said. He bit into it, then made a face. You sure this wasn't meant to be a rock? Chloe giggled and tackled him with a hug. Later, after Chloe had fallen asleep with her bear clutched tight and crumbs on her pillowcase, Amara stepped out of her room and found Elliot standing in the dimly lit hallway, staring at nothing. She asked me tonight if you'd be reading her a bedtime story again, he said quietly. I will. Do hi, he nodded. There was a pause before he added. She also asked if you were going to stay forever. Amara folded her arms. And what did you say? I told her. That's not something grown-ups always know. I do. She looked at him. That's honest. Minister. But I also told her, he added, that sometimes the people who show up in the middle of a storm are the ones who were meant to stay all along. Welf. Amara didn't reply. Instead, she glanced toward the window where snow had begun to fall again. You ever grow anything? He asked suddenly. Excuse me? Like a garden. Plants. To goddess. She smiled faintly. Not really. I grew up where soil was mostly clay and hope. I'd go. My wife, she tried every spring. Never could keep anything alive past July. Oh, Amara looked at him. Some seeds still take root, just need the right ground. With Constadus, their eyes met. He looked away first. Good night. Amara. Good night. Elliot. We have tour Zavin. As she stepped back into her room, she noticed Chloe's drawing now pinned to the corner of the fridge, a new one. This time, the 3 stick figures were holding hands beneath a sun instead of snow. There was a 4th figure drawn beside them, smaller, off to the side, not touching yet. Amara stared at it for a long time. A seed had been planted, and though snow still covered the world outside, something was beginning to grow. The next morning began the same way. Quiet, dark, and still, but the silence no longer felt hollow, it felt expectant, like a pause before a familiar tune resumed. Amara rose early, her feet guiding her through the soft-lit kitchen in that new rhythm she'd begun to know by heart. She brewed the coffee slowly, deliberately, savoring the ritual. She still wasn't sure what to call this space in her life. A job? A refuge? A detour? But whatever it was, it carried its own fragile peace. The napkin today read, 1 breath at a time. That's how all storms pass. Is the monaded. She folded it neatly and placed it beside Elliot's cup. Then she started breakfast, nothing fancy. Just scrambled eggs, sourdough toast, and a side of blueberries for Chloe, who insisted they made her think faster. Oh, Gran, as if summoned. Chloe's small footsteps came pattering down the stairs, her curls half sleepy, wearing a mismatched pajama set with stars on top and bunnies on the bottom. Morning, baby, Amara said softly. Chloe rubbed her eyes. Is it Saturday? It's Tuesday. The sand, Chloe sighed. So no cartoons? Maybe just 1 episode if we finish braiding your hair and eat breakfast in 10 minutes. INT. The child grinned and nodded. Amara guided her onto the stool and gently began brushing the sleep from her hair with careful fingers. Chloe leaned into the touch, humming the same melody Amara had been singing the day before, a quiet joy. At 7:40, Elliot walked in. He was freshly shaved, suit crisp, though a sliver of tired still clung to the corners of his eyes. He noticed the napkin. He read it. Then, for the first time, he smiled before taking his first sip. Amara didn't look directly at him but caught the moment in her periphery. The house, like him, was beginning to soften. Later that morning, with Chloe at school and Elliot gone to the office, Amara walked the long upstairs hallway again. This time, she stopped at the room with the closed door. She didn't open it, but she stood there for a long time. Instead, she turned and went downstairs, pulled out a fresh vase from under the sink, and filled it with water. Then she stepped out into the snow-covered garden behind the house, plucked a few surviving winter berries, and arranged them in the vase. Small color. She placed the vase on the hallway table beneath the framed black and white photo of the Brooklyn Bridge, one of the only personal touches she'd seen in the house. Maybe this place needed more of them. She spent the rest of the day reorganizing the pantry, tossing out expired jars, and gently folding all of Chloe's little laundry piles that had been forgotten in a corner of the laundry room. There was something comforting in the rhythm of care. In the afternoon, a package arrived, Chloe's new snow boots. Amara opened the box, checked the size, then left it on the girl's bed with a little note. For your next snow day adventure. A2. That evening, Elliot came home early. It was just after dusk. He walked in with 2 bags of groceries, an unexpected gesture. I thought maybe we could cook dinner together. Izrabayad. Amara blinked. You cook? I follow instructions well. Way, she smirked. That's not the same thing. Close enough. Together. They stood in the kitchen while Chloe colored at the dining table. They chopped onions, laughed when Elliot dropped half a carrot behind the counter, and debated the correct amount of garlic for a roast chicken. More, Amara insisted. As the food baked, the house filled with a smell that hadn't visited in years, home cooking not meant for guests, or galas, or catered events. Just a simple meal between people who had nothing to prove to each other. When they sat to eat, Chloe looked up at both of them and said, It smells like Grandma's house. Eza, your mom's mom? Elliot asked gently. Chloe nodded. When she made soup and sang in the kitchen, with Dogja. Amara glanced at Elliot. His expression was unreadable for a moment, caught somewhere between memory and grief. After dinner, they cleaned up together. Chloe washed a few small plastic plates. Standing on a chair Amara had steadied for her. Amara dried. Elliot rinsed. It felt almost theatrical in how ordinary it was. And yet it was real. Later that night, with Chloe fast asleep and the dishes done, Amara stepped out to the back patio for air. The snow had stopped. A thin crust of ice sparkled under the moonlight. She stood in the quiet, arms crossed against the chill. I used to love the snow, Elliot said from behind her. Before. Do have a -5. She turned slightly. Before? Before it reminded me of loss. He stepped forward, coat wrapped tightly, his voice low. That night, the night we lost her, it snowed. Just like this. I waited in the ER parking lot for hours. And when they told me, he paused. Amara didn't fill the silence. Some words needed space. He continued, his voice rougher now. I kept thinking, how can the world be so white, so quiet, when everything inside me was breaking? Amara's eyes burned. He turned to her. This is the first winter I haven't hated it. Because of you. I'm Seed, she swallowed. I'm just a guest. Too. Elliot shook his head slowly. You're more than that. Braided Janels. She didn't answer. But when he turned to go back inside, she lingered in the snowlight just a moment longer, letting the quiet settle, letting the warmth between walls seep just a little deeper into her bones. The next morning would come, and with it, more small rituals, napkins, braids, cocoa. But for now, under the silver hush of midnight, something unspoken but certain had taken root between them. It was Saturday. No alarms. No rushing out the door. Just snow piled like soft mounds of sugar on the windowsills and a warm hush filling the house. Amara stirred first, still not used to the luxury of sleeping in. She lay still for a moment, listening. No sounds from the hallway yet. The kind of silence that didn't scream loneliness, but gently invited her to breathe. She pulled herself from the quilted bed, wrapping Elliot's late wife's scarf around her shoulders without thinking. It smelled faintly of lavender still, like a memory refusing to leave completely. Downstairs, she boiled water for cocoa instead of coffee, the early light filtering in through the kitchen windows like pale gold. She opened the cupboards and found the ingredients Chloe had chosen last week: flour, chocolate chips, and a small bag of rainbow sprinkles hidden in the back. She smiled. By the time Elliot entered the kitchen, barefoot in joggers and a plain navy sweatshirt, Amara already had flour on her cheek and 2 mixing bowls on the counter. You're up early, he said, voice still laced with sleep. It's Saturday. That means cookie morning, Amara replied. Or so I was told. Together, Elliot raised an eyebrow. Chloe's tradition? Apparently. And I'm not one to ruin a good thing. She handed him a spoon. You mix. I'll supervise. If you well to see isn't no. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Amara gave him a look. Last time you diced carrots? One tried to escape into the vent. Two. He grinned, actually grinned and stirred without protest. Minutes later, Chloe appeared in the doorway. Arms stretched overhead, yawning in exaggerated fashion. Her curls were tangled, and she wore a nightgown covered in cartoon planets. What smells like Saturday? She asked. Your sous chef is underperforming, Amara said, gesturing toward Elliot, who was elbow-deep in dough. Chloe giggled and ran to grab her apron. The one with glitter handprints from preschool still stained across the front. The next hour passed like a scene from someone else's life. Chloe added too many sprinkles. Elliot broke 2 eggs into the same bowl and got shell everywhere. Amara dropped a spoon, sending flour puffing into the air like smoke. They all laughed real laughter. Not the polite kind saved for strangers. It was Chloe who said it. Halfway through her 3rd cookie. Powdered sugar on her nose. This is the happiest day since forever. I had seized and seedens of the matter 5. The words hung in the air, light and heavy at the same time. Amara's smile softened. Elliot didn't say anything, but his hand resting near Chloe's on the table moved just slightly closer. After lunch, Chloe asked Amara to come build a fort in the living room. Daddy's forts always collapse, she whispered. Amara obliged. With sheets from the linen closet and pillows from every couch in the house, they built a castle that spanned the length of the room. Inside, Chloe placed her flashlight, 3 picture books, and the bear she still slept with. Elliot passed by with a cup of coffee, paused, and took in the scene. Looks stable. Teclis offers and terra few do as not oxes in this. Better than your attempts, Amara teased. I resent that. Geez, truth doesn't need permission. I preed it. He shook his head, but a chuckle escaped as he moved on. Inside the fort, Amara and Chloe curled up and read The Snowy Day. The little girl hung on every word, then asked, Can you read it again? Of course. I grabbed it. Midway through the 2nd reading, Chloe fell asleep. Her small body curled against Amara's side. Amara didn't move, not even when her leg went numb. She simply lay there, one arm cradling the child, who had without warning found a space inside her heart. The peace was interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps. Elliot peeked in through the folds of the fort's blanket wall. His voice was barely above a whisper. She out? Amara nodded. He crouched outside the opening, resting on one knee. She trusts you. Eder. Amara looked down at the child, breathing steadily against her. She's easy to love. Ax too. So are you. Artie. The words caught her off guard. She looked up. Elliot didn't move. Didn't try to take it back. He simply let the moment settle between them, like snow falling gently onto already covered ground. Amara swallowed. You barely know me. Eeper. I know enough. She opened her mouth, closed it again. He stood slowly. I'll be in my office. Was not ago. After he left, Amara remained in the fort for a while longer, unsure of what had just shifted but knowing something had. Later, when the sun dipped and the house bathed in the soft golden hour, Elliot returned with something in his hand, a photograph. He handed it to Amara in the kitchen. It was a picture of his late wife holding Chloe, both of them smiling. Wind blown on a pier somewhere. She loved Saturdays. Said they were the best kind of days because you didn't owe them anything. Even. Amara studied the photo, then looked up. You still love her? He nodded. Always will. Oh geez, scree down. I'm not here to replace her. We doon forgutted. His voice was steady. I don't want you to go. I am. Amara let out a slow breath. So what do you want? Elliot hesitated. To believe it's possible to feel something again, without betraying what I already had. Tupris. She looked at him for a long moment. Then maybe, she said. We start with cookies and forts, one Saturday at a time. Diaz. That night, Chloe drew a new picture at the table. 3 stick figures again. This time, one was in a red scarf, another in a long dress. All were standing beneath a rainbow with the words, My family scrawled in bright purple crayon. Elliot saw it. Smiled. Can we put it on the fridge? Chloe asked. Absolutely, he said. Amara pinned it up with a magnet shaped like a sun. No one said the words out loud. But in that simple gesture, something was declared. A seed had cracked open. Not fully bloomed. Not yet. But it was growing. The storm returned without warning that night. Thick snow rushed the windows like ghosts trying to get in, and the wind howled low through the corners of the house, like a memory begging to be heard. Amara woke with a start. She didn't know why at first. The room was dark, quiet, and still. The fire in the corner had gone low, casting a soft orange glow that danced across the floor. Her body ached in that dull, familiar way residue from the week before when she was left in the cold too long. She blinked, then sat up, ears tuned. There it was again. A soft sound, a whimper, not from the wind. She slipped from the bed, pulled on her robe, and stepped into the hallway barefoot, careful not to creak the floorboards. The sound came again, higher now, fragile, a child's cry. Amara's heart tightened. She moved quickly but silently toward Chloe's room. The door was cracked open. The dim nightlight painted the little girl's room in gold and gray shadows. Stuffed animals lay scattered across the floor like tiny soldiers asleep. But Chloe sat upright in bed, arms wrapped around her bare, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. "Sweetheart," Amara whispered. Stepping inside, Chloe didn't look at her at first. Her body trembled. Lips parted in a soundless sob. Amara crossed the room in 2 quick steps and climbed onto the bed. She pulled Chloe into her lap without a second thought, wrapping her arms around the child like a fortress. "I'm here," she murmured. "It's okay. I've got you." 18. Chloe clung to her, her small fingers gripping Amara's robe like a lifeline. "Don't go," the girl whispered. "Please don't go." "It two-hand, Krasta. I'm not going anywhere." "Would you?" Chloe pressed her face into Amara's chest. Her breath hitched, and then barely audible came the word, "Mommy, please don't leave again." "Enfried." Amara froze. For one long second, her breath caught, suspended in the room like the hush before snow falls. She tightened her arms around the girl, rocking her gently. "I'm right here," she whispered, voice cracking just slightly. "You're safe, Chloe. I promise." Tekantina, unseen. In the hallway, Elliot stood frozen. He had been woken by the same whimper. He'd meant only to check on his daughter, to peek in and make sure she hadn't kicked off her blanket or dropped her bear. But now, he stood rooted outside the room, a ghost in his own house. "Mommy," the word slammed into his chest, hollowing him out like a blow he hadn't prepared for. His breath shortened, his jaw clenched. He watched, unable to step inside. Amara, still holding Chloe, didn't see him, didn't know. She simply continued to murmur soft promises into the girl's ear, brushing her curls gently until Chloe's sobs slowed, softened, turned to breathing again. When she was sure Chloe had drifted off, Amara laid her gently back onto the pillow, tucked the blanket up to her chin, and kissed her forehead. The room glowed with quiet. Elliot turned away before Amara stepped out, disappearing down the hallway without a sound. He didn't want her to see his face, didn't want her to read what he couldn't hide. Downstairs, he sat alone in the darkened living room, the storm outside echoing the one inside him. He didn't sleep, not that night. When Amara woke the next morning, the house felt different, the kind of different you could taste in the air before a storm breaks. Something had shifted, something subtle, but sharp. She came down to the kitchen and found it empty. No coffee pot gurgling, no clatter of Chloe's cereal bowl, no footsteps from upstairs. She waited a few minutes, then made breakfast anyway, pancakes shaped like clouds, just how Chloe liked them. The table was set, napkins folded, but only one seat was filled. Eventually, Chloe came padding in, quiet and pensive, her usual bounce gone. Amara helped her into her chair, tied her hair gently, even though the child didn't say much. "Want me to walk you to the car today?" Amara asked softly. Chloe nodded without a word. But Elliot didn't appear. Not that morning. Not the next. When Amara passed him in the hallway later that week, he gave only a brief, polite nod. The kind of nod you give a stranger in a waiting room. His eyes didn't meet hers. Gone was the man who made jokes while chopping onions. Gone was the father who crouched outside blanket forts with a smile in his eyes. He had folded back into himself, retreating behind the careful mask she'd seen the first day. And Amara knew why. He heard it. He heard Chloe call her mommy. And that word, the one that had caught Amara off guard with warmth, had shattered something in him. The rest of the week passed in strange dissonance. Chloe still reached for Amara's hand, still asked for stories before bed, still laughed when they baked or played. But Elliot was gone from the space between them, physically present, emotionally absent. At first, Amara thought maybe she'd crossed a line. Maybe her comfort had confused Chloe, had awakened something unspoken too soon. But deep down, she knew it wasn't her fault. And it wasn't Chloe's either. It was grief, raw and sharp. Grief that still lived in this house like a fourth, uninvited presence. Grief that whispered in the walls and pushed Elliot further away every time life tried to come back in. One night, when the house had gone still, Amara wandered the hallway again. She stopped in front of the closed door, the one she'd never entered. This time, it was ajar. Just slightly. She hesitated, then pushed it open gently. The room was untouched. Neat. Intact. Preserved like a moment in time. Medical journals and novels lined a tall bookshelf. A pale blue comforter was tucked tightly on the bed. On the nightstand, a framed photo of a dark-haired woman smiling with her eyes. The scent of lavender lingered faintly, like perfume fading from memory. Amara didn't touch anything. She just stood there, breathing. And somewhere down the hallway, Elliot's voice came low and quiet. "You found it." "I." She turned. He stood at the doorway, one hand on the frame. "I haven't changed anything," he said. "She was everything." "Was no way." Amara nodded. "She must have been extraordinary." "Right. She was brilliant, kind, and stubborn as hell." He smiled faintly, painfully. She would have hated how quiet this place became. "Was not a day. You don't have to erase her," Amara said. "But Chloe still needs someone now. So do you." Graced. For a long moment, Elliot said nothing. Then he looked up, not at the room, but at her. Not as a replacement, but as someone who had shown up in the storm. "I'm scared," he said. Amara's voice was barely a whisper. "Me too." She stepped out of the room, gently leaving the door open behind her. And somehow, that made all the difference. It was the first Saturday in weeks that didn't bring snow. Instead, a thin winter sun hung low in the sky, spilling pale gold across the sidewalks of Central Park. The trees stood bare and brittle, but the air was kinder. Chloe ran ahead of Elliot and Amara, bundled in her new red coat, chasing pigeons with a giggle that echoed like wind chimes down the walk. Amara walked slowly beside Elliot. Their pace matched. Unspoken, she held Chloe's mittens in her gloved hand, ready for when the child tired of running and needed warmth again. A thermos of cocoa peeked from Elliot's coat pocket. They had packed it together this morning, their hands brushing once or twice. Neither had pulled away quickly. "She's glowing," Amara said, watching Chloe twirl near a snow-dusted bench. "She's not rested." "Lighter," Elliot replied, "like something's finally been let go." "I got it." Or someone let her feel again. Their eyes met briefly before they both looked away. A silence stretched between them. Not awkward, but tentative, like standing on ice you're not sure will hold. Amara noticed Elliot watching Chloe closely. The way he carried himself had changed. Just slightly. He wasn't watching to protect her from breaking anymore. He was watching to see her live. They stopped near the edge of the pond. Chloe came running back, out of breath, cheeks flushed with joy. "Can we take a picture?" she asked. Elliot hesitated, then smiled. "Of course. It is not a good of now." He reached into his pocket for his phone. But before he could unlock it, a man across the path raised a camera. Snap. Click. Amara flinched. Elliot's eyes narrowed. Who was that? She asked. I don't know, Elliot replied slowly, watching the man disappear into the crowd. Chloe, oblivious, climbed onto the bench and threw her arms around both of them. Amara and Elliot smiled for the photo. But something shifted again, small, invisible. By late afternoon, the photo had surfaced on a New York social media page, one known for celebrity sightings and speculations. Billionaire Elliot Graves, spotted in Central Park with mystery maid and daughter, blizzard romance in full swing. By nightfall, it had gone viral. The next morning, Elliot didn't mention it, but Amara saw his jaw tighten when he checked his phone. She didn't ask. At the hospital later that day, where Amara picked up a weekend shift in the pediatric ward, she found herself cornered by one of the nurses. Carla, sharp-tongued, always watching. They're talking about you, Carla said, leaning in, voice low. Amara closed her locker. Who is they? Everyone. That photo is everywhere. Oh. Amara pressed her lips together. It's nothing. It is not other reason. Carla tilted her head. He hasn't said anything to the press? No. Eat. Well. Carla shrugged. Guess some people enjoy being the headline. It is. Amara didn't respond. But inside, a familiar knot twisted in her chest. Later that evening, Elliot was quiet during dinner. Chloe talked about school, about her art project and how a boy in her class tried to eat a glue stick. But the air around the table was thinner. No one addressed the elephant, the photo. The press, the whispers. After Chloe went to bed, Amara lingered in the kitchen. Elliot stood at the sink, rinsing mugs, his face unreadable. People are talking, she said gently. I know. Their content's 25. She waited for more. For a statement. A defense. A vow. Instead, he dried a cup and placed it quietly on the rack. I can handle whispers, she said. I know, he repeated. She turned toward him. But can you? He met her gaze, something restrained flickering in his eyes. I didn't ask for the spotlight. It is not off. I didn't ask for it either. But I'm in it now. So is Chloe. I be dear. He said nothing. The silence this time was colder, sharper. That night, Amara sat in her guest room long after the fire had gone out. She stared at the scarf folded on the armchair. She thought of Chloe calling her mommy in a dream, of Elliot vanishing behind his walls again, and of the world looking in, deciding what she was without knowing her name. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. But she folded the scarf carefully, smoothing its edges. Then she began to pack. The following week brought more headlines. Chloe didn't notice, but Elliot did. And Amara, though still helping with homework, still cooking dinner, still tying Chloe's braids, began to drift, like smoke from a dying candle. The invitation to the company's annual gala came on Thursday. Elliot handed it to her at breakfast. I want you and Chloe there. As. Amara hesitated. Are you sure that's wise? His voice was steady. It will be good for people to see you. Idea. At the gala, she wore a modest navy dress. Chloe wore white, a red ribbon tied at her waist. Elliot, in his usual black suit, looked untouchable. But the moment they entered the ballroom, conversations halted, eyes turned, lips whispered. As they crossed the floor, Amara heard it low, sharp, coated in syrup. She doesn't have a family name, no real credentials. I suppose making a child call you mommy is one way to secure your place. End quote. The words hit like ice water down her spine. Amara's hand instinctively tightened around Chloe's. She looked to Elliot. He had heard. She saw it in the slight shift of his shoulders. But he didn't turn, didn't defend. Instead, he smiled at a potential investor and began a conversation, cool and polished as glass. Amara didn't say anything. She bent down to Chloe's ear and whispered, Let's go home. Sweetie. Chloe nodded, tired from the noise and the heels. They left early. The house was quiet when they returned. Elliot had stayed behind. Amara moved slowly through the halls, her steps soft but final. She gathered her few things. The photograph Chloe had drawn, her scarf, the nightlight she kept by her bed. Then she stepped into Elliot's office, placed the scarf on the desk, and left a folded letter beside it. She didn't cry, but her hand trembled as she wrote the final line. Please tell Chloe I love her. As if she were my own. The door didn't slam. It clicked softly, like a whisper leaving the room. By the time Elliot returned home after the gala, the house felt off like the moment you open a book to find a page torn out. He walked into the kitchen, loosened his tie, and poured himself a glass of water. The silence hit first. Usually, even late at night, he heard something: Chloe's gentle breathing through the baby monitor, the creak of Amara's footsteps in the hallway, a light left on accidentally. Tonight, there was none of that. The house was clean, too clean. His eyes fell on the note. The scarf was folded carefully, her handwriting elegant. Quiet looked like it had been written slowly, every curve deliberate. Please tell Chloe I love her. As if she were my own. He read the sentence twice. Then again, the last time. The words didn't blur. They burned. He sat down in the chair beside his desk, holding the scarf like a lifeline, and lowered his head into his hand. The world outside could have crumbled and he wouldn't have noticed. The weight of the week, the whispers, the photographs, the silence, all of it crashed down in that single, final moment. She was gone. Upstairs, Chloe stirred. Elliot rose slowly and climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When he opened her bedroom door, she was sitting up, rubbing her eyes. Daddy? She whispered. I'm here. Is Nother? She looked past him. Where's Amara? He hesitated. She had to leave. When to place this? Chloe frowned, a small line forming between her brows. Why? She didn't say much. Just that. It was time. It is 9. Tears sprang to Chloe's eyes without warning. She clutched her bear tightly. But she said she was staying. She said she was my family. Or cries Ian. Elliot sat on the edge of her bed. I know. Orlita divinated. She lied. Is not. No. Baby. She didn't lie. His voice broke on the last word. Chloe shook her head. Crawling under the covers. I want her back. A.T. Elliot didn't have an answer. Instead, he reached forward and held his daughter close, letting her cry against his chest while guilt soaked into every part of him. He had failed again. First his wife, now Amara, and Chloe, small. Brave Chloe was the one paying for it. The next morning, there was no Coco, no singing from the kitchen, no braids tied with care, just silence, and a little girl staring at her untouched cereal. The days passed in gray. Chloe grew quieter, her eyes scanning the door at odd moments, as though expecting Amara to walk in, apologize, say it was all a mistake, but she never came. Elliot sat in meeting after meeting, but nothing stuck. His team noticed it. The edge was gone. His assistant offered to clear his calendar twice, and when he refused, she gave him a look that hovered between pity and concern. The press tried to stir it up again, asking where the mystery maid had gone. If the story had taken a sad turn, the internet buzzed, then got distracted, then moved on. But Elliot didn't. One night, as he passed by Chloe's bedroom, he heard her whispering softly. He paused, pressed his ear to the door. She was speaking to her bear. It's my fault. I shouldn't have called her mommy. I broke everything. I was Node. Elliot's throat closed. He didn't open the door. Couldn't. Instead, he walked down to his office, poured a scotch, and sat in the dark. He stared at the scarf on his desk, still folded exactly as she'd left it. Next to it, her note. He hadn't moved either since she left. He unfolded the letter again, reading the entire page. He hadn't before. He hadn't wanted to feel the full weight of her words. But now he read it line by line. I never came here expecting to find a home. I just needed shelter, a place to rest. But what I found was a child who taught me how to laugh again, and a man who, without knowing, reminded me how much love I still had to give. But I can't be somewhere I'm hidden. I've spent too many years shrinking myself in rooms that couldn't hold my truth. I won't do it again, not for fear, not for whispers, not for comfort. Tell Chloe I will always be her safe place, even if I'm far away. And, Elliot, please don't wait until the next storm to realize the house is warmest when you're not alone. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, Elliot Graves wept. Not the quiet kind of grief he'd been mastering for years, but the kind that came from love lost. From realizing too late that he'd let the best thing walk out the door because he hadn't known how to hold it. The next morning, he packed Chloe's lunch, tied her coat, and drove her to school himself. On the way, she was quiet, holding her bear in her lap. Before she stepped out of the car, he touched her hand. Would you want to see Amara again? Chloe turned to him slowly, eyes wide. More than anything. These times. Elliot nodded. Then I'm going to fix this. I don't know how yet, but I will. It's Don's bat. She didn't smile, but she leaned forward and kissed his cheek before stepping out. That night, Elliot sat at his desk with her scarf wrapped around his hand and a name written on a yellow legal pad. Amara Dorsey. He had no address, no phone number, no idea where she'd gone, but he'd built his empire on solving impossible problems, and he wasn't about to let this be the one he gave up on. Not now. The following Monday, Elliot didn't go into the office. Instead, he sat in front of the large oak desk in his study, a steaming cup of black coffee growing cold beside him, and every bit of energy focused on one task, finding Amara. The house was still. Chloe had been dropped off at school, her mood a little brighter after their brief conversation. Hope flickered in her eyes. Elliot had promised her something, and for the first time in months, he intended to follow through with a vow that had nothing to do with finance, meetings, or shareholders. He started with the obvious, the agency that had first sent Amara, a quick call, a few business references, and within 15 minutes, he had someone on the phone. Yes, Amara Dorsey was placed temporarily with you through emergency winter relief. The woman on the line confirmed, but she wasn't registered long-term, just a temp support role. Would Self-Menes. Elliot leaned forward. Do you have an address? Contact number? I'm afraid we can't release that information without her consent. I'm Adji. He exhaled. I understand. But this is important. And guys. There was a pause on the other end. Then the woman said softly. She listed a contact reference. It's a shelter. Haven Hearts. South Bronx. Oh so. He wrote it down. Thank you, he said. He didn't tell anyone where he was going, not his assistant. Not the nanny covering Chloe's after-school hours. Not even his driver. He wanted to do this alone. The car ride to the South Bronx was long and quiet. As buildings blurred past the window, Elliot found himself rehearsing what he would say if he saw her. I'm sorry. I should have stood up. I should have spoken when it mattered. You were never invisible to me. Come home. Haven Hearts was nestled between two boarded-up storefronts. Its front door painted a fading lavender. A handmade sign was taped to the glass. Hope lives here. I am. Elliot entered cautiously. Inside, a young woman in her 20s greeted him from behind a counter. Her nose pierced, and her sweater 2 sizes too big. Can I help you? Sir, I'm looking for someone. Amara Dorsey. She may have stayed here recently. The woman studied him with wary eyes. She doesn't want to be found by just anyone. I'd go. I'm not just anyone, Elliot said. And to his own surprise, his voice cracked. I need to apologize. And I need her to know that a little girl misses her every day. Is not. The girl's gaze softened. She left yesterday, packed her things and said she had a cousin in Albany. Took a bus out early in the morning. As Elliot's heart sank. But, the girl added, she left this with me dime. From under the desk, she pulled out a small paperback book, worn edges. Soft cover. A pressed white envelope tucked into the pages. Elliot reached for it with trembling hands. The cover read, The Color of Water. Inside the front flap, her name was written in tidy script. Below it, just one note. For whoever finds this, may you know what it means to rebuild from ashes. The envelope had no name on it. Inside was a letter. Elliot, if you're reading this, I suppose you tried. I never doubted that you would. That's what hurts the most. You didn't fail me by loving your wife still. You failed me when you stayed silent in the moment I was reduced to less than human. When your presence didn't shield me. When your love didn't reach across the room. Even with your child in my arms. But I understand now. You're grieving. And grief makes cowards of the best of us. Still, I love Chloe. That will never change. And for a time, in your home, I felt something like a future. Maybe that was the gift. Maybe that's all it ever needed to be. If our paths cross again, I hope we're both braver. Amara. Elliot closed his eyes. He pressed the letter to his chest and stayed there for a long moment. The air around him buzzing with regret and something else resolve. That night, back at home, Chloe asked the same question she asked every night now. Any news? Elliot knelt beside her. She's okay, but she needed space. It's Sina. Chloe's face fell. But I wrote her a letter. He added, would you like to write one too? She nodded quickly. Together, they sat at the dining room table. Elliot wrote first. His words precise, but honest. Amara. I was silent when I should have spoken. I was safe when I should have been brave. I let my fear of public scrutiny outweigh what I owed you. Protection. Acknowledgement. Truth. I'm sorry. I don't want to move on from what we had. I want to move forward with it. Come home. Or let me come to you. Please. Then Chloe's letter short. Scrawled in crayon. I miss you. I love you. Daddy made pancakes, but they weren't as good. Come back. I saved you the red crayon. They mailed the letters together the next morning. There was no reply for days. Then a week. Chloe stopped asking. But Elliot didn't stop hoping. One Friday evening, just as the sky turned lavender above the Manhattan skyline, a package arrived at the door. No return address. Inside, a drawing. A stick figure family of 3. And beneath it, in careful handwriting, sometimes love leaves to see if it's missed. Thank you for noticing. M. Elliot stared at it. Breath caught. He turned the drawing over. On the back, just a line. See you soon. Ender Parrish. The first snow of February had come late. But when it arrived, it fell thick and fast. New York was blanketed again, and the city seemed to sigh under its weight quieter. Slower, kinder in its hush. Chloe was in the living room that evening, coloring by the fireplace. Her new drawing was full of bright yellows and red summer colors, as if she were willing spring to come early. Elliot stood in the kitchen, pouring hot chocolate into 2 mugs. He added the marshmallows carefully. Just how Amara used to 3 in each. Chloe always counted. He'd been waiting for a sign that her note wasn't just closure, but a key. Do you think she'll come back before my birthday? Chloe asked suddenly, not looking up from her drawing. Elliot paused. I hope so, he answered. She knows where we are. That's something. I have seasoned. Chloe tilted her head, then drew a heart in the corner of her paper. I think she misses us. Ards, I think so too. When to Kattig. Just then, the doorbell rang. Elliot frowned. They weren't expecting anyone. The neighborhood rarely saw visitors unannounced. Especially not after dark. Especially not in snow like this. Chloe perked up. Maybe it's a package. Elliot set down the mugs and walked to the front door, adjusting the sleeves of his sweater. When he opened it, the cold hit him first. Then his heart did a strange, slow twist. Amara stood there. Snow clung to her coat and in the curls of her hair. Her cheeks were flushed from the wind, and she looked like she'd walked from another world just to get here. In her hands, a small suitcase. Nothing more. I hope I'm not too late, she said softly. Elliot stared for a moment, unable to breathe, much less speak. Then, almost as if his body moved before his brain did, he stepped aside. She entered slowly, her boots damp, her gaze flicking across the space like it was both familiar and foreign. The warmth wrapped around her instantly. The smell of cocoa, the sound of Chloe's pencil scraping the page, the golden light on the hardwood floor, it all tugged at her chest. Chloe looked up and dropped her crayon. Amara. She launched off the floor and into Amara's arms before anyone could say a word. Amara dropped the suitcase and caught her mid-leap. holding the child so tightly it was as though she was afraid she might disappear again. "You came back," Chloe whispered. "I told you," Amara said, kissing her hair. "You were never not my family." They stayed like that for a while still, breathing each other in. Elliot watched from a few feet away, his throat tight, his hands still cold from the door handle. Eventually, Chloe pulled back and looked at both of them with wide eyes. "Do you want cocoa? Daddy made it, but it's okay." "Arthur," Amara smiled through tears. "I'd love some." "IMCN." Chloe grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the kitchen like nothing had changed, like time had folded and erased the ache. Elliot followed slowly. They sat at the counter, Amara on one stool, Chloe beside her, Elliot across. The mugs were warm, the silence tender. Finally, Amara looked at him. "I wasn't sure if I could come back," she said, not without feeling like I was asking for something that wasn't mine. "Adias." Elliot met her gaze. "It was always yours. I do under. I needed to know you'd say it out loud. That you'd stand up. Not just beside me, but for me. I'm Andre. I failed once," he admitted. "I won't do it again." He pulled something from his pocket. A velvet pouch. He placed it on the counter, carefully sliding it toward her. She hesitated before opening it. Inside, a simple, gold pendant, oval-shaped, engraved with a single word on the back. "Home." "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a promise that this house, this life, isn't complete without you. It is next tune." Amara touched the pendant, running her thumb across the engraved letters. Her lips parted, but no words came. Then Chloe reached out, placing her small hand on Amara's. "Please don't leave again," she said. "I won't," Amara whispered. "Not unless you push me out with a broom." "Tour did," Chloe giggled, and Elliot let out the breath he'd been holding for weeks. That night, they sat in the living room together, Amara curled on one side of the couch with Chloe nestled against her, Elliot on the other side, legs stretched toward the fire. Chloe fell asleep first. Elliot looked over the top of her head and caught Amara's eyes. "I don't want to take things too fast," he said, "but I do want to ask you something." "We no do." "Okay." End quote. "Would you stay?" She arched an eyebrow. "Like, forever stay? Maybe not forever right now," he said, voice soft. "But long enough for Chloe to stop drawing stick figures, long enough for us to build something real at us." Amara nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said. "I think I can stay for that." Later, when he walked her to the guest room, the same one she'd once packed up in silence, they stood outside the door for a long beat. He touched her hand. "I meant what I said in that letter. About wanting to move forward, not move on." "I man it. I know," she replied. "And for what it's worth, I'm not here to rewrite what you had before." "Everyone," Elliot nodded. "But we can write something new." "Aiding," she smiled. "We already started." "I think that's dated." Sunlight broke through the curtains like an old friend. For the first time in weeks, the Graves house did not wake in silence. Instead, laughter rang down the hallway. Soft footsteps padded against the floors, and the scent of warm cinnamon drifted from the kitchen. Amara stood by the stove in a gray knit sweater and jeans, barefoot, humming an old Motown tune under her breath. She flipped a pancake with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how her audience liked it, crispy at the edges, soft in the middle. Behind her, Chloe sat on the counter, feet swinging, hair wild from sleep. "I think today's a good day for heart-shaped ones," Chloe said, watching the batter sizzle. "Heart-shaped? Huh?" Amara glanced over her shoulder, grinning. "What's the occasion? You came back. That's like Valentine's Day for real life." "It is actions of Hadaj." Amara paused. Her chest swelled. She leaned over and kissed Chloe's forehead. "Then we'll make heart-shaped pancakes until we run out of love." "Oh," Chloe giggled. "That means a lot of pancakes." "I say." In the doorway, Elliot stood watching. His sleeves were rolled up, a newspaper in one hand, his coffee in the other. He hadn't said anything yet. He didn't need to. The sight before him was everything he'd been trying to hold together and everything he thought he'd lost. When Amara turned and saw him, she smiled, not shy, not cautious, just honest. "You're up late," she teased. "Had a good reason to sleep in." "Andy." Chloe slid off the counter and ran toward him, hugging his waist. "We're making pancakes forever now," he laughed, bending to kiss the top of her head. "Forever's a long time. Kiddo. Is a ride." "Exactly," Chloe said with the authority only a child could summon. Amara handed Elliot a plate, steam curling off the heart-shaped stack like an invitation. They sat together at the kitchen table. No fancy dining room, no stiff posturing, just the three of them, passing syrup and sharing laughter. For once, there was no past trying to climb back in through the windows, only the moment, and the warm, quiet certainty that they were building something worth holding on to. After breakfast, Elliot took Chloe to school. Amara stayed behind, rinsing dishes and wiping the counters. She hummed softly, less like a melody now, more like contentment. When Elliot returned, she was out back, standing by the garden plot that hadn't been touched since fall. She wore his coat, the sleeves too long, her breath visible in the cold. He stepped onto the porch. "What are you thinking?" "That this yard has potential," she said. "A swing, some tulips, maybe tomatoes." "Anne, you planning on staying long enough to harvest tomatoes?" She turned, arching an eyebrow. "You planning on giving me a reason?" He descended the steps slowly, stopping just beside her. "I am," he said. "One honest reason at a time. Is." She studied him, then reached out, brushing a hand along his coat collar. "You're different." "Aye. So are you." "Overzealous." He hesitated. "I know it's early," he said, "and I know what we had was delicate, but I also know that I've never seen Chloe this alive, or felt this certain. Certain about what?" He looked at her. "That we could be something whole, not perfect, not replacing what was, but whole in our own way." "Aye." She didn't reply right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the pendant, the one he'd given her. "Home." She pressed it into his hand. "I never wore it," she said. "Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid I'd believe it too much." "Our man." Elliot swallowed. She continued. "But now, I'm ready to believe it." "The FC." He closed his fingers around the pendant and nodded. That night, after Chloe fell asleep to the sound of Amara reading a bedtime story, her voice warm and rhythmic, Elliot poured 2 glasses of wine and waited in the den. Amara joined him, curling into the opposite end of the couch. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The fire crackled, low and steady. Outside, the wind had died down. Inside, time moved slowly. Eventually, Elliot broke the silence. "I was thinking of reopening Grace's clinic." "Aye." Amara looked over, surprised. "The one in Harlem?" He nodded. "She built it from the ground up. It's been closed since." She placed her hand on his. "I think that would be beautiful." "Is not it as done?" He took a breath. "I want you involved. If you'd want to be. You understand people. And you care. And I think you'd help me keep her legacy alive, not as a shadow, but as something new." Amara was quiet for a long moment. Then, with a softness in her voice, she said, "I would love that." With created dishes parted, he nodded, relief washing over his features. "And, Elliot? Yeah? I'm not just staying for Chloe, or even just for you. Ara, I know, Misabetted. I'm staying because, for the first time in a long time, I want something to grow." End quote. She reached for his hand, fingers threading through his, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man trying to survive his past. He felt like someone planting roots. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost unreal, like waking from a long, harsh dream into a world that was finally warm again. Chloe's mornings were filled with chatter and bright drawings. Her nights ended with Amara's voice humming lullabies into the dark. Elliot, who once spent his evenings buried in spreadsheets and press calls, now found himself leaning into slower moments. Family dinners. Board games on the floor. Stories told in the kitchen over boiling pasta. But peace, like winter light, is often thin and fleeting. It was late on a Wednesday when Elliot's past came knocking wearing perfume and entitlement. Amara was setting the table. Chloe upstairs brushing her teeth. When the doorbell rang, Elliot opened it without checking the camera. Standing in the entryway, dressed in a camel-colored coat and holding a designer handbag like it was a weapon, was Genevieve Langston, one of Grace's closest friends, and a longtime socialite with a stake in New York's elite circles. She didn't wait for an invitation. "I saw the headlines," she said. Stepping inside, Elliot stiffened. "Genevieve, this isn't a good time." "I was knowed." She ignored him and glanced around the foyer, her eyes quickly landing on the scarf, folded neatly on the side table. "Amara's. So it's true," she said coldly. "The maid. She's still here." "Enwell. She has a name," Elliot replied, voice flat. "Yes. Well, names don't buy respectability." "Work stand." He stepped between her and the rest of the house. "Why are you here?" Genevieve smiled, sharp and practiced. "I'm trying to help you, Elliot. This, whatever this is, it's not going to end well. You've got investors, clients, media eyes on you, and they're all whispering about how far you've fallen since Grace passed." "AD," he bristled. "I didn't fall. I grieved. Regularly. And now you're playing house with a woman whose resume wouldn't get her through the front door at half your events. Do you really think the board won't take action? Or that your daughter won't pay for this in 10 years? Elliot's fists clenched. Before he could respond, Amara's voice came from behind him. "I've heard enough." Everwide. Genevieve turned. Amara stood in the hallway, holding a folded cloth napkin. Her voice was calm, but her eyes, they burned with quiet strength. "This is his home," Amara said evenly. "And mine now, too. You don't get to walk in here and spit on that because it makes you uncomfortable." Genevieve scoffed. "You think this little domestic fantasy will protect you from the real world? This isn't some fairy tale." "No," Amara said. "Fairy tales don't come with grief, racism, or judgment wrapped in designer silk. But this is real. The hurt, the healing, and the love we're building in spite of people like you. It is 9. Genevieve's lip curled. "You're nothing." I'm everything Chloe needs," Amara replied, stepping forward. "And I'm exactly the kind of woman Grace would have wanted her daughter to be raised by." "Oh." The room went still. Genevieve's face darkened. "You're going to regret this," she said to Elliot, but he didn't flinch. "I already regret letting people like you define how I lived for so long." Genevieve turned on her heel and stormed out, her heels clicking sharply on the marble. When the door closed, silence fell again. Elliot turned to Amara. "I'm sorry." "Wins, of course. You don't have to apologize for her." "I'm stayed." He stepped closer. "No. I mean for all the times I let voices like hers speak louder than mine. Or yours." 8. Amara looked up at him. "You didn't today." With Odu's, he reached out, gently touching her arm. "I meant what I said. This is your home, and I will never let anyone take that from you." "Is the stab?" She nodded once. Then Chloe called from upstairs. "I'm ready for my story." Amara smiled faintly and turned to go, but Elliot caught her hand. "She's not the last ghost that'll come knocking," he said quietly. "Are you sure you're strong enough for this?" Amara looked him square in the eyes. "I've lived through worse than whispers." "Is blue gettest." That night, as she tucked Chloe in and sang softly under her breath, Elliot sat outside the door, listening, and when Amara stepped out, he didn't say anything. He just held out his hand. She took it. Later, in the quiet of the living room, he brought out a photo album, one he hadn't opened since Grace passed. "Do you want to see her?" he asked. Amara hesitated, then sat beside him. Page by page, he showed her Grace laughing, dancing, holding baby Chloe. They talked quietly, not about what was lost, but about what could be honored. When the last photo closed, Amara leaned her head against his shoulder. She was beautiful, she whispered. She would have liked you, he replied. She would have challenged me. She challenged everyone. To do for a minute, he smiled. Outside, the wind picked up again, but inside the house, the storm had passed. By the time March rolled in, the first green shoots began pushing through the frosted soil in the garden. Amara had started planting despite the lingering cold. She said things needed time underground before they could bloom in the light. Elliot had smiled at that. She wasn't talking about seeds. Every Saturday, Chloe helped her, wearing oversized gloves and a pink beanie. She'd dig with focused determination, while Amara guided her gently. Not too deep. Baby, let the earth breathe. Israeli minus. Elliot watched from the patio most mornings, sipping coffee, his world narrowing to these moments, simple, unshaken, real. But nothing real ever stays untouched. That Monday, Elliot's phone rang at dawn. Mr. Graves, this is Miranda Walker, managing partner from Pentalion Equity Group. We need to speak. He sighed. What's the issue? I'd prefer to say this in person, but there's concern among the board members. Some have received letters, anonymous, raising questions about your personal life, about your choices. Isnatella, he pinched the bridge of his nose. You mean the woman I love? There was a pause. That's one way to frame it. He met Miranda that afternoon in his office downtown. She slid a folder across his desk, thick with printed screenshots, social media posts, and emails. He didn't need to read them. He knew the pattern already. Whispers dressed as facts. Fear disguised as concern. Let me be very clear, she said. There's no policy breach, no contract violation, but perception shapes power. You know how these things ripple. I think. Elliot's eyes didn't waver. And what's the board suggesting? Distance, she replied. Until things settle. No public events. No family outings that invite speculation. Keep it quiet. He stood slowly, adjusting his cuff. Let me be clear in return. I built this company with transparency, with dignity. I will not treat someone I care about like a liability. Oh, then be prepared for pushback. Day adapted. He didn't flinch. Let them push it free. That night, as he stood at the stove flipping quesadillas for Chloe and Amara, the smell of garlic and cheese filling the air, he glanced at the two of them laughing over spilled juice and a half-tied braid. They were worth every consequence. Later, after Chloe had gone to bed and the dishes were done, he told Amara. She listened quietly, arms folded, eyes unreadable. I expected it, she said after a while. But it still stings, he replied. She nodded. I've been a scandal to people like them before I ever walked into your life. I have a date sickness. Elliot reached for her hand. You're not a scandal. You're my beginning again. Tensurers, she searched his face. And if this costs you everything you've built? He didn't hesitate. Then I'll build something better. As to us. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she stepped closer and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. I won't let you burn your life down for me. You're not the fire. Amara, you're the reason I'd walk through it. Regulations. The next morning, he did something unexpected. He called a press conference. No media blitz. No staged statement. Just Elliot Graves, standing at a podium with the city seal behind him, addressing the whispers himself. I've been fortunate to lead Graves Holdings with integrity and vision, he began. But no legacy is worth protecting if it requires silence when truth demands a voice. He looked out at the crowd of reporters. Amara Dorsey is not just a woman I care about, she's part of my family. She is kind. She is brave. She has taught my daughter to laugh again. And if that offends those invested in my company, then maybe it's time they invest elsewhere. Is not a go, the room murmured. Elliot didn't blink. He continued. This country was built on people daring to love across lines drawn by fear. I won't be part of drawing them again. Not in my business. Not in my home. By the time he walked off stage, his phone buzzed endlessly, half praise, half outrage, but his spine was straight, his heart lighter. When he returned home, Amara was waiting on the porch. Chloe curled up beside her with a book. "I saw it," Amara said. He sat next to her. "I didn't do it to prove anything," he said. "I just couldn't let them rewrite our story." "I can, Pend." She turned to him. "I love you." Jeesoned. The words hung there quiet. Simple. Solid. Elliot's eyes softened. "I love you too." "Well," from her lap. Chloe grinned. "Are you guys gonna get married or what?" They laughed. Amara leaned her head on Elliot's shoulder. "Let's just grow the garden first." 18. And in that moment, it was enough. Because love, real love, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stay. The week after the press conference brought an unexpected calm. No board member called for Elliot's resignation. Stock prices held, and while some investors grumbled behind closed doors, others quietly voiced admiration. It seemed that Elliot's bold declaration of love had reminded people of something America often forgets. Dignity isn't found in conformity. It's found in courage. But not everyone was ready to let it go. One morning, as Elliot dropped Chloe off at school and kissed her goodbye, a black SUV pulled up outside the school gates. From the passenger seat stepped a man Elliot hadn't seen in over a decade. Nathan Caldwell. Tall, silver-haired, and dressed in a suit that probably cost more than some people's annual salaries. Former chairman of the Graves Board, old friend of Elliot's father, and, most importantly, the kind of man who believed legacies were best protected by silence. Elliot felt his stomach tighten. "Nathan," he greeted coolly. The man offered a thin smile. "I'd hoped we could speak." "Owe." Elliot glanced around. Parents shuffled past. Children laughing in the snow-covered yard. "This isn't the place." End quote. "Then make one. Doesn't it?" They agreed to meet at a private lounge that evening. It was one of those members-only places with leather chairs, heavy drapes, and the ghost of cigars in the air. Nathan was already waiting when Elliot arrived. A glass of scotch untouched in front of him. "I've known you since you were in short pants," Nathan said, skipping pleasantries. "Watched you build Graves Holdings from nothing but a name." "He's Proco." Elliot nodded once. And now I'm watching you gamble it all for a woman who, no matter how lovely, will never be accepted in certain circles." Elliot's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe I need new circles." "It's Series I," Nathan sighed. "You're not hearing me. This isn't just about you. This is about the legacy you're shaping for Chloe." "Where?" Elliot leaned forward, voice low. "Don't you dare use her to justify your bigotry." "I damstow. This is business." Elliot. "AD. No. This is fear talking. Yours. Not mine." When stewed, Nathan's face hardened. "The world hasn't changed as much as you think. It's not resented." Elliot stood slowly. "Then let me be the one to change it. One room at a time." He left without another word. That night, back at home, Amara noticed his silence. She was folding laundry in the guest room, now permanently hers. The closet held both her clothes and his button-downs. The nightstand had Chloe's drawings tucked into the drawers. She was no longer a guest here. She was woven into the walls. "Something happen?" she asked gently. Elliot told her everything about Nathan. About the warning. About the slow erosion of old friendships he once thought immovable. When he finished, Amara didn't offer comfort. She offered clarity. "You know, I've had people look at me like that my whole life," she said softly. "Like I didn't belong in the room. Like my skin came with a price tag. I hate that you've had to carry that. When carried it too." She folded a shirt slowly. "I hate that Chloe might one day feel it too." "It says." Elliot stepped closer. "Then we protect her. We show her a love that doesn't flinch when the world stares." "IDs." Amara looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "And when it throws stones, we build with them." In another way. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Amara laughed softly, brushing away a tear. "You're starting to sound like me." Elliot smiled. "You've always been the better poet." Everyone. The next morning, Elliot made a decision. He returned to the same office building. Same boardroom. Same men in suits he used to defer to. He brought Chloe with him. She sat beside him at the polished mahogany table, feet swinging beneath her chair, holding a small stuffed bear in one hand. "I want you to meet someone," Elliot said to the room. "This is Chloe. She's not a shareholder. She's not a partner. But she is the reason every decision I make matters." He looked around. "You talk about legacy. This is mine, and I will not let anyone shame the family I'm building just because it looks different from yours. Tekid." He turned to his daughter. "Do you want to say anything?" "Sweetheart?" Chloe looked up, then simply said, "Amara makes the best pancakes and hugs. She makes our house feel like a home." "I did nine." Silence. Then one board member, Miranda Walker, smiled. "That's good enough for me." "Right, Al." Elliot took Chloe's hand and walked out. At home that evening, he found Amara in the garden, kneeling beside the first green sprout poking through the thawing ground. "It made it," she whispered. Elliot crouched beside her. "So did we." "Is videoed." She looked at him. "Even if more storms come?" He nodded. "Especially then." "I was one." She placed her hand in his. They didn't need grand promises. No fancy rings. No announcements. Just roots in shared soil. And the knowing that love, when planted deep enough, could weather anything. Spring came in soft waves. Mornings began earlier. Now sunlight poured through the windows like a warm invitation, and the scent of fresh earth lingered in the backyard garden, where tulip shoots pushed their way toward sky. Chloe had taken to calling them Amara's flowers. She'd even drawn a label and taped it to a popsicle stick, planting it proudly beside the sprouts. Amara didn't protest. She smiled and let it stay. Inside the house, there was a sense of settling. Rooms that had once echoed with grief now pulsed with laughter. Footfalls. Bedtime stories. And sometimes unexpectedly quiet. The kind of quiet that feels full instead of empty. But the past rarely stays buried. That Wednesday, a letter arrived. It wasn't postmarked. No stamp. Just a cream-colored envelope, slipped under the front door in the middle of the afternoon. The handwriting was sharp, elegant, and unmistakable. It was from Grace's mother, Vivian DeWitt. Elliot held it in his hands for nearly an hour before opening it. He sat at his study desk. The window behind him opened to the sound of wind in the trees. He unfolded the note carefully, as if it might crumble. "Elliot, I saw the press conference. And the photos. I've waited long enough. I'd like to meet her. Not to judge. Not to scold. To understand. Vivian." He read it twice. Then a third time. Vivian was a woman of few words and sharper instincts. For years after Grace's passing, she'd stayed away grieving privately, mourning not just her daughter, but the version of Elliot she once believed in. This letter was a door creaking open. Later that night, after dinner, Elliot told Amara. Her reaction wasn't what he expected. "Okay," she said simply. "Okay?" he asked, surprised. "You're not nervous?" "Oh, I'm terrified," she replied, folding laundry with careful precision. "But if I say no, she'll think I'm hiding, and I don't hide anymore." He sat beside her. "She can be difficult. This is tenser. So can I," Amara said with a small smile. They arranged to meet for brunch on Sunday. A quiet cafe on the Upper West Side. Private booth. No press. No photographers. Just 3 people carrying pieces of the same woman in their memory, each shaped differently by grief and time. When Sunday came, Amara wore a soft navy dress and a beige trench coat. She left her curls loose, her makeup minimal. Chloe stayed with a friend for the morning. As they entered the cafe, Vivian was already seated. She was tall, regal in posture, with silver-white hair swept into a twist and pearls at her throat. A cane rested against the table, though she barely leaned on it. Her eyes, ice-gray and watchful, flicked up at their approach. Amara felt the weight of that gaze like a test. Elliot pulled out her chair. "Vivian," he greeted. She nodded. "Elliot. Miss Dorsey." "Ask Amara," she said gently. extending a hand. Vivian took it. Firm but not cold. Amara. Then, it is not. Silence settled briefly between them as the waiter arrived, took their orders, and retreated. Then Vivian spoke. I was not kind to Grace in the final year of her life. Was not Nate? Elliot looked up sharply. She was tired. Vivian continued. Worn down. I thought it was motherhood. Stress. But I didn't ask. I judged. I thought she should smile more. Be more grateful. I didn't know she was sick. Was now there's two, mate. Her voice did not shake, but her fingers trembled slightly as she folded a napkin in her lap. And when she died, I made her death about me. I was angry. At God. At you. At the world. I refused to see anyone who reminded me that I'd failed to be what she needed. Friend. Amara said nothing. She let the words come. Vivian turned to her. Then I saw a photo of Chloe smiling again. Beside you. Easter Burkazonster. Amara blinked. I saw joy in her face I hadn't seen since Grace passed. And it forced me to ask myself, what right do I have to resent the one person who brought my granddaughter back to life? Amara leaned in slightly. I don't want to replace Grace. 90 Welf. I wouldn't let you. Vivian said, her tone still sharp. But love doesn't replace it, re-roots. And you've done that. Isdi. Amara nodded. Voice quiet. She saved me too. They spoke for nearly 2 hours. About Chloe. About Grace's favorite songs. About the smell of her hair after the rain. They cried a little. Laughed gently. When they stood to leave, Vivian surprised them both. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a locket. Gold. Oval-shaped. Etched with a rose on one side. On the inside, a photo of Grace holding baby Chloe. I want her to have this when she's ready, Vivian said. But until then, I want you to hold it, so she remembers this family doesn't just belong to the past. Edith. Amara closed the box, clutching it tightly. Thank you. Well, Vivian stepped forward, then paused. You're stronger than I was, she said. Don't let this world break you down. Eat. She turned to Elliot. And you protect them, not just with your name, with your spine, with his CK. I will, he said. As they walked out into the spring light, Elliot slipped his hand into Amara's. I think Grace would have liked that. O's. She would have told us we were crazy. Amara smiled. He chuckled. And then baked a pie anyway. Well, that night, they showed the locket to Chloe. She held it like a treasure, whispering, I wish Mommy Grace could see us now. Do, Panid. Amara kissed her cheek. I think she can. The garden was in full bloom. Tulips stood proud beside rows of basil, and tiny white flowers dotted the fence line like lace. Chloe had planted a row of sunflowers, her new obsession, and every morning she dashed out to see how tall they'd grown. One afternoon, Amara found herself kneeling in the dirt with her hands covered in soil, humming to herself as she worked the roots of a stubborn rose bush into softer ground. The sun warmed her neck. The air smelled of lavender and fresh grass. She didn't hear the knock at the door, but she heard Elliot's voice a moment later, tight, clipped. Why are you here? Amara stood slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans. She stepped around the garden bed and froze at the edge of the porch. A woman stood in the doorway, younger than Elliot, but not by much. Blonde, tall, polished, a kind of elegance that came from expensive upbringing, not effort. She wore sunglasses pushed to the top of her head and carried a monogrammed handbag in the crook of her arm. Kendra, Elliot said again, this time louder. You can't just show up here. I freighted. I called. The woman replied. You didn't answer. So I came. Amara stepped forward. Her breath caught somewhere between her ribs. Kendra turned and noticed her. Oh, she said flatly. So the rumors are true. Was. Elliot moved quickly, stepping between them. This isn't the time, he said. No? Kendra crossed her arms. Because the ink isn't even dry on the estate transfer. And now you're playing house with your maid? Amara's spine straightened. Elliot's jaw tensed. You're not going to come into my home and insult someone who's given more love and grace to this family than half the people who showed up for the funeral. Oh, Kendra laughed, bitter and sharp. Is that what this is? You needed someone to fill the silence? Get to the point, he said, voice low. Kendra's expression hardened. You're trying to reopen Grace's clinic. In her name. Would Yusuf say? That's right. And Day. Well, I own 25% of that property. We have to so. Elliot frowned. Grace bought you out of the partnership years ago. However, technically, she did, Kendra said, pulling papers from her bag. But the land deed still has my name attached. Grace never filed the change. Probably forgot. But now it's mine again. Legally. I jawed. Amara stepped forward. Why are you doing this? Kendra looked at her. Because I won't let some stranger rewrite the story of a woman she didn't even know. 18-7. I knew her daughter. Amara replied. I've dried her tears. Held her through nightmares. Loved her like my own. You think Grace wouldn't have wanted that? Kendra didn't answer. Elliot moved to stand beside Amara. So what now? Kendra straightened. Either you buy me out, at triple market price, or I sell my portion to someone else. Away. You want money. Don't. I want control. She snapped. And I won't let you dress Grace's memory in borrowed robes. Aight. With that, she turned and walked away. They stood in the silence that followed, the sound of Chloe's laughter drifting faintly from her bedroom window. Later that evening, Amara sat on the porch, turning the locket over in her hand. The golden casing felt heavier now, not just with memory, but with risk. Elliot joined her, handing her a cup of tea. She's bluffing, he said. You sure? No, but I'll find out. Amara sighed. You could give her what she wants. Keep the peace. Ender. He looked at her. I've lived with peace that came from surrender. I'm done doing that. She nodded. Then we fight. He reached for her hand. She's not the last person who'll try to pull this apart, he said. Grace had a lot of ghosts. Well, I'm not afraid of ghosts, Amara whispered. It's the living I've learned to be careful with. I endeavored. That night, as Chloe slept and the wind rustled the garden leaves, Elliot called his lawyer. Then he called the city clerk. Then he pulled out the box of files Grace had left, old contracts, partnership forms, donation receipts. At 2 a.m., he found it, a handwritten amendment, signed by both Grace and Kendra, dated and witnessed, unfiled, but real. Amara leaned over his shoulder. What is it? Proof, he said, that she gave up her rights. She just never followed through. Okay, Amara's breath caught. Will that be enough? He looked at her, determination in his eyes. It has to be. The next morning, before Chloe woke, Elliot met Kendra in a downtown cafe. Neutral ground. He slid the paper across the table. I have no interest in suing you, he said, but I will. And I'll win. Ask. Kendra stared at the document. I'm giving you one chance, he continued. Sign over your portion. At market rate. No games. Man. And if I don't? Elliot leaned forward. Then I make sure your name is printed beside every story about a woman trying to sabotage a clinic named after her dead friend. 10T passed and her fingers twitched. He stood. Think about it, he said. You used to believe in something. Kendra, maybe it's not too late to remember. I gutted. He left the cafe without looking back. That evening, a courier arrived at the Graves residence. Inside the envelope, a signed deed transfer. No note. Just closure. Elliot walked outside to the garden, where Amara knelt beside Chloe, helping her water the basil. It's ours, he said. Amara looked up, blinking. The clinic? He nodded. Chloe clapped. Can I plant sunflowers there too? Elliot laughed. You can plant a whole jungle if you want. Minus. Amara stood and wrapped her arms around his waist. I'm proud of you. Oh, he kissed her forehead. I'm proud of us. Eyes, because this time, the roots were deep, and no one could pull them out. The morning of the clinic's reopening arrived with a quiet kind of electricity in the air. It had taken months of legal unraveling, renovations, inspections, and dozens of late nights sorting through Grace's old files. But finally, the doors were ready to open again, not as a memorial, but as a beginning. A new brass sign had been mounted on the front brick wall, the Grace Graves Community Wellness Center. Below it, in smaller letters, for every soul who needed a second chance. It was Amara's addition. The ceremony was small. By design, Elliot had insisted no press, no sponsors, just people, families, volunteers, the nurses and therapists who would serve the neighborhood, the children who would one day find safe space behind these doors, and Chloe, of course, standing proudly beside Amara in her new blue dress, clutching a giant pair of novelty scissors for the ribbon cutting. "Amara," Elliot said, adjusting his tie nervously as the clock neared 10. "You ready?" Amara smoothed the front of her dress and looked toward the clinic, blinking against the sun. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." Well, as guests began arriving, the sound of laughter, warm greetings, and old friends reuniting filled the air. Among the crowd, Amara spotted Ms. Dolores, the elderly woman from her old block, now smiling with her cane and wrapped in a church hat that matched her shoes. Across the sidewalk, a mother with 3 kids held a plate of muffins and whispered, "That's her, the woman who saved that man's daughter. Is say have her a bent today." Amara flushed, but smiled. She didn't need the praise. She just needed to know the right people had found their way here. Inside the clinic, the room smelled faintly of lemon and fresh paint. Walls were hung with local artwork. Every detail had been chosen with intention, from the hand-woven chairs in the waiting area to the sign on the front desk that read, "Come as you are." At 10:05, Elliot stepped forward with Chloe, Amara at his side. A hush fell over the small crowd. "Thank you for being here," Elliot began, voice steady, though emotions stirred beneath. "This building is more than brick and paint. It's a promise to care, to show up, to remember." When 5 out, he glanced toward Amara, his hand brushing hers briefly. "And none of this would be possible without the woman standing next to me. Amara Dorsey is the heart behind this new chapter. She is the reason I remembered what it means to serve. To lead with grace, pun fully intended. To why?" Laughter rippled. Chloe beamed. Amara stepped forward. "I didn't know Grace Graves," she said softly, "but I know the life she left behind. I see it in Chloe's eyes, in Elliot's stubborn kindness, in this building that carries her name. It no do." She looked over the crowd. "This isn't a rescue mission. This is a neighborhood saying to its people, you matter. Your health matters. Your pain matters. And most importantly, your healing matters." Oh, there were quiet nods, even a few tears. Chloe stepped up, scissors in hand. "Can I cut it now?" she whispered. Amara smiled and nodded. "Go ahead, baby." Was now pleased, with a dramatic snip. Chloe cut the red ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause. Elliot kissed the top of his daughter's head, then turned to Amara and kissed her in front of everyone, not showy, not grand, just full of quiet devotion. Inside, the first families began walking through the doors. Children tugged at their parents' hands, pointing at the colorful murals. Elderly couples marveled at the accessibility ramps. Nurses stood by in pale blue uniforms, ready to receive new patients with open hands and open hearts. Amara watched it all unfold, standing in the center of the lobby like a tree planted in firm soil. Vivian arrived an hour later. She wore a pale lavender coat and a brooch shaped like a dove. She didn't say much, just walked the halls slowly, occasionally brushing her hand along the wall. At one point, she stopped in front of a photograph of Grace hung in the center hallway, her smile wide, hair tied up, holding newborn Chloe. Vivian turned to Amara. "She would have loved this." I hope so," Amara replied. "She would have loved you, too." 01. They shared a long, understanding look. As afternoon fell, Amara slipped out to the back of the building, seeking a moment of air. Elliot found her there minutes later, holding a ribbon scrap in her fingers. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just thinking. Do, my friend." "About what?" "About how much it takes to believe we deserve good things." "To then," he stepped closer. "You do. We have companies really ones in stayed." She looked at him. "So do you." Was knowing. A breeze stirred the trees, scattering new leaves across the pavement. "You know," she added, "for a long time, I thought survival was the best I could hope for. Is never. And now? Now, I want joy. I want roots. I want Sunday dinners and messy mornings and a garden that outlives us." "Why?" he smiled. "You've got all of that here." "Edie is content." She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. "Then let's never stop earning it." I major. That night, after the last guest had left and the sun had dipped behind the skyline, Amara sat in the garden with Chloe curled in her lap, both of them wrapped in a quilt. Elliot brought them hot cocoa and joined them under the stars. "I think Grace would have liked today," Chloe whispered sleepily. "I think she would have, too," Amara replied. Elliot wrapped an arm around them both. And in the quiet, in the garden they'd grown together. 3 hearts beat in time, not haunted by the past, but held by it. The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. A pie was cooling on the windowsill, Amara's peach and brown sugar creation. One Chloe insisted should always be made when it's a celebration day. And today, even with its quiet simplicity, felt exactly like that. It had been 6 months since the clinic opened. Since that red ribbon fluttered to the ground and a whole new chapter began. Since then, the community had embraced the space. Kids came in for after-school tutoring. Elderly neighbors got their prescriptions filled with dignity. And once a week, Amara hosted a women's circle in the small conference room, where laughter and tears flowed more freely than the tea. Elliot's business continued to thrive not because of silence or image control, but because he stood taller in truth than he ever had in fear. Some investors had walked, but better ones stepped in. People who understood that integrity wasn't weakness, it was the strongest currency there was. It was early evening, and Amara stood in the living room, holding up a picture frame she had just unpacked from a box she'd left untouched for years. Inside the frame was a photo her mother, standing outside a run-down Louisiana diner, apron smeared with flour, beaming proudly. Behind her, a hand-painted sign that read, "Open Hearts." Always, Amara smiled, brushed dust off the glass, and found a place for it on the mantel beside Chloe's drawings. Grace's locket, and a clay handprint the size of a biscuit. "What you doing?" Chloe peeked around the corner, cheeks still red from running outside. "Just adding someone important to the room," Amara said. Chloe patted over. "Is that your mommy?" Amara nodded. She was strong, brave, a little too loud sometimes, but she loved with her whole heart. "Is no dough, like you," Chloe whispered. Elliot entered just then. His sleeves rolled, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "Dinner's ready. Girls." "Aye," Chloe grinned. "Can I set the table?" "You can," Elliot said, handing her a stack of napkins, but no forks under the cushions this time. "Aye, that was one time." They laughed as she darted off to the dining room. Elliot moved beside Amara, watching her as she looked again at the photo. "You've built something," he said softly. "So have you." In his 9, he leaned in, brushing his lips against her temple. "You ready for the next step?" Amara turned. "Which step is that?" He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. No fanfare, no dramatic speech, just Elliot, heart in hand. "I don't want perfect," he said. "I don't want a big wedding or a parade or anyone's approval but yours. I want this. You, Chloe. Mornings with burnt toast and Sunday gardens and bedtime songs." Reposed. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a tiny diamond set into the curve, nothing flashy. But it sparkled when the light hit just right. Amara blinked. "Are you proposing in the kitchen? Where else do all the best things happen?" She laughed, tears spilling before she could answer. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times. "Yes, I." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they held each other like time had folded in half just to bring them here. Dinner was slightly overcooked, the pie too sweet. Chloe spilled juice twice, but it was perfect. After dinner, they curled up on the couch. Chloe nestled between them, the dogs snoring at their feet, the fire crackling in the hearth. Amara looked around the room, the photo on the mantel, the toys in the corner, the worn sofa that had become their favorite spot. She wasn't just visiting anymore. She was rooted. She was home. And not because someone offered her a roof, but because love real, tested, unwavering had offered her a place to belong. Later that night, as she tucked Chloe into bed, the little girl looked up at her and asked, "Will you be my mommy forever?" Amara swallowed hard. She sat on the edge of the bed and cupped Chloe's face. "I already am. Baby, I always will be." "Is sometime." Chloe threw her arms around her. In that moment, every insult, every eviction, every night she had slept on cold floors or walked through snow with blistered feet, it all melted. It had led her here. When Amara stepped into the hallway, Elliot was waiting. Holding 2 mugs of tea, he handed one to her, then raised his in a toast. "To forever," he said. She clinked her mug gently against his. "To finally," she replied. They stood there in the quiet of their home, hearts full, the ghosts of their past finally at peace. Outside, spring gave way to summer, and the garden rooted in the soil of struggle and watered by love was in full, unapologetic bloom. This story reminds us that family is not always born, it is built. True love isn't measured by wealth, appearances, or approval from the world, but by the quiet courage to stand beside someone when it's hardest. Amara's journey teaches us that dignity can survive even the harshest winters, and that healing begins not when we are accepted by others, but when we finally accept our worth. In a world that too often judges by skin or status, this is a story of grace, resilience, and the power of choosing love over fear.